This is Jed Distler, and welcome to the Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. And I want to thank you for subscribing to this podcast via my Substack page for the Piano Maven. We've had a good number of paid subscribers coming on board, and I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I thank free subscribers as well, although if you do take out a paid subscription, you get all kinds of goodies, such as our Piano Maven Zoom Hangout meetings, where we will be listening to recordings and talking about all kinds of piano issues, performances, concerts, trends, competitions, you name it. So please consider subscribing to the Piano Maven to keep this podcast in production. And you can see a link to how to subscribe in the episode description. Moving on, normally on this podcast, I discuss commercial recordings. And some of you have written asking about live piano performances that turn up on YouTube or else performances that are uploaded in news groups that are devoted to live broadcasts for the most part. So I thought that this would be a good idea to pursue every now and then, even though one reason that I really do want to focus on commercial releases is that so we can support the record companies who are putting a lot of money into new releases and reissues. And we put a lot of money into that as well as consumers. Yet, at the same time, when certain recordings that we might want to hear happen to be out of print or they are extremely difficult to source, then that's where websites such as archive.org come in very handy. I am a big fan of archive.org. It contains one of the largest depositories of recordings available for streaming or to download for free. And I often go there in search of unusual, obscure, or out-of-print items to play on my weekly radio show Between the Keys. For instance, there are boatloads of out-of-print piano recordings that only came out on LP that people have uploaded onto archive.org. Now, the quality of the transfers are very variable, so you have to be really aware. Like sometimes you'll get the scratchiest, worn-out copies of certain LPs uploaded. That also goes for the gazillions of old 78s that people upload to archive.org. But recently on this site, I've been stumbling upon some live concerts with pianists, which I guess have been sourced from audience recordings or maybe from broadcasts. Again, the sound quality is variable, so it's really hard to know what the source material is. But when it comes to this website, you just have to be patient and you just keep on digging and listening and figuring things out. There's one concert that I recently hit upon while exploring archive.org that I want to talk about on this episode. It features the pianist Eric Liu. He first came to my attention in 2015 when he won 4th prize as one of the finalists in the Warsaw Chopin Competition. And 3 years later, in 2018, the 20-year-old pianist won 1st prize in the 2018 International Leeds Competition. And then he signed with Warner Classics. In fact, I was hired to write the booklet notes for his Warner Classics solo debut CD, which contained the 24 Chopin Preludes, Opus 28, and I think, definitely, it contained works of Brahms and Schumann. I don't have that disc right in front of me, but I do remember writing the notes for it. I did write the notes for it, but I didn't get the audio at the time when I was writing the notes. Anyway, Eric Liu has gone on to a very respectable and very busy career, and I can't say that I have been following his activities with any consistency, but I've always enjoyed his playing, and I admire the strong personality that always comes through the playing. So, when I was recently browsing through archive.org, I found that someone had posted MP3 files containing Recital that Eric Lew gave in Leipzig, Germany on July 2nd, 2022. It sounds like a decent audience recording to my ears, although maybe it could have been broadcast, but you still get a sense from listening to this of how Eric Lew projects his big singing sonority in a concert venue. The recital starts with a beautifully played and well-characterized interpretation of Schumann's Waldszenen, Opus 82, the forest scenes. I love this cycle. And Eric Lew really sets the right atmosphere in these pieces, maybe not to such magical effect as in the old Sviatoslav Richter studio recording from the 50s, or more recently, that marvelous live recording that was on Sony Classics with Arkady Volodos. That's a fantastic Waldszenen. But Eric Lew gives a lovely performance all the same. I really enjoyed it. And then he plays the Brahms theme and variations in D minor that the composer arranged from his original string sextet scoring. This is great Brahms playing from the bottom up, and you hear full and shapely bass lines that support the soaring right-hand melody lines that Eric Lew spins out throughout. The performance sounds full-bodied instead of thick to my ears, and I also think that Eric Lew makes the most assiduous and seamless transitions, and this really imparts an unassailable unity to the interpretation. Very, very impressive. However, Eric Lew becomes much more subjective over the course of Chopin's Piano Sonata No. 2, the Funeral March Sonata. In the first movement, he alternately stretches out phrases, but he also indulges in sudden dynamic surges and accelerations that normally you would think would fragment the structure and kind of render the movement all over the place. But somehow this freewheeling approach seems more organic in Eric Lew's hands, at least in this performance. Maybe less so in the scherzo, where I think some of the retards and some of the emphatic broadenings at phrase ends kind of belabor the obvious. But the freedom with which Eric Lew plays that trio section, forgive my singing. What I was going to say was that the freedom with which he plays this trio section is justified by a really strong left hand. And you will notice how the left hand cantabiles have such a richness about them. It's almost as if a cello had taken over from the piano. The Funeral March movement, though, is definitely on the slow side. I think it's too slow for my taste. But it's a big and epic conception. And if Eric Lew doesn't generate the same kind of excruciating tension that I find absolutely gripping when a pianist like Alexander Gadzhiev, for example, plays this piece, I admire Eric Lew's resolutely steady pacing. At least he holds your interest. And then he effortlessly, perhaps even offhandedly, sails through the finale's fast unison lines. And then as an encore, he gives the slow movement from Mozart's Sonata Kochel 330. It's a sonata in C major. This slow movement is in F major. This is beautifully modulated pianism. It's often rounded off at phrase ends, and it's very pretty, but I kind of miss the really multi-leveled operatic kind of sensibility that you hear from other pianists. I'm thinking even with Vladimir Horowitz and his Moscow performance. So, on balance, this recital with Eric Liu is most enjoyable. I've posted the archive.org link to either stream or download this concert, although if you download it, you're going to have to tag the files yourself, which is a little bit of a pain in the butt, but anyway, at least you can get the music. So do check out Eric Liu live in Leipzig on July 2nd, 2022, which you can find on archive.org. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to being with you for the next episode.